Hello, I am thrilled to be with you and to have this time to talk about some creative aspects to the work that we get to do through employment best practices. I'm going to start just to kind of lay out the structure of how we'll spend our day together. I'm going to take just a minute for a quick review of best practices regarding employment because the work that we are focusing on ties back, of course, to the purpose of our work. So that link between what we're doing today, I want to make sure I'm making very clear how that benefits you. Additionally, we're going to focus on some skills that are critical, bring in a little bit of the arts, which can always be fun in the work that we do. We're going to really focus on learning more about observation and memory in the work that we do, listening and communication, critical thinking and creativity. And there will also be points of how you can improve your skills in these areas. That has been proven to be possible because our brains are pretty fluid and can grow and learn in ways that sometimes we feel stuck. I also want to do a quick look at the knowledge, skills, and abilities that tie back to a diagram of the 9 CE competencies to further clarify why we're spending this time on these aspects of taking in information, kind of cognitive science with the work that we do. And then we're going to practice. We are actually going to look at some work I've done over the last year, and in one case, 2 weeks ago. We're going to actually go through the photographs surrounding discovery and how we incorporate what we are talking about today, what I'm sharing with you, into the good work of helping people have inclusive lives, and especially inclusive lives through employment. So when we get to the stories of actual job seekers, you're going to look at how you're going to utilize observation, memory, listening, communication, critical thinking, and creativity to help you begin to synthesize and pull together information about a job seeker as you move through discovery. So I think we're ready to begin. So as I said, I'm just going to ground us real quickly in some of the critical aspects of employment best practices. So this is going to be a quick review, again, linking observation, which is the title of the webinar today, with the work that we do around employment. So we're grounded in the values of individuality, choice, empowerment, social inclusion, community settings, community experiences, and employment. I pulled out to the side the 3 areas that are really the settings for the work that we're going to do utilizing these aspects of how we can utilize our cognitive abilities to ensure we get accurate information that creates quality outcomes. So we're going to focus on community settings, experiences, and how that leads to high-quality employment outcomes. Tied also to the work of employment best practices are the skill sets that we have to have: customer-focused or job seeker-focused, and community-based. The work that we do happens in the real world, in the community, not in a facility or a building. We get out and we actually work in real-life situations. The work we focus on is we look at what is the person passionate about. We focus on the strengths, not the deficits. And we use our personal connections and the ability to collaborate with those individuals that we know, that our coworkers know, that the family knows, the job seeker, calling that social capital. How we can utilize those relationships to open doors, again, for the individuals we're working with to have employment or inclusive lives. And we know that the most effective way to achieve quality outcomes through employment best practices is to utilize a team-based model. You can't do this work in isolation. And we'll talk a little bit later about cautionary tales, and I'll bring up the importance of the teamwork piece. We also think about our role as community builders. Again, using a person-centered approach, and the connections that we have are other people who are connected to individuals in our lives, businesses that we use, that we purchase from. Those relationships may be critical in helping achieve an outcome. And then relationships that the job seeker, the family, anyone who's important to that person, who can help us as a team think through, again, I keep saying, and I will continue to say, high quality community-based outcomes. So as community builders, we're looking at helping the job seeker identify their interest, planning with them ways to develop meaningful community roles, valued roles, and developing those relationships as we all value in our life. And then helping the job seeker find their niche to participate and contribute to their community. Again, that valued role that we all want. So in a nutshell, discovery simply answers the question, who is the job seeker? We can put blinders on in terms of anything else. Discovery is taking the time and the luxury to focus on who the individual is. And discovery is a form of person-centered planning, specifically person-centered employment planning. And how do we facilitate discovery? Through conversation, interview with important people, champions of the person, time spent together. Those are really the ways that we get to know anyone, and it's no different as we're working with the individuals who want to become employees. And then observation, and I highlight that in red because that's where we're about to begin. So participation in community activities, and it always sounds weird to say community activities because that's not what we call what we do when we spend time in the community. But I think as folks are beginning to integrate these concepts into the work they do, we emphasize that it's community-based, that they are community activities, not facility-based activities or activities that are still tied to maybe a more traditional model of how we support folks. And lastly, we review records. So as we're moving through finalizing the summary so that you're grounded in the best practices model that the remainder of the webinar will be tied back to, it's important just to stress that the time we spent with the person in real community experiences are based on the person's favorite community activity, because we want to see what does it look like at their best, when they're in the flow, when they're doing something that they love. We also look at community-based activities that the individual has wanted to do but has never done. That helps us understand what does it look like if there might be a little stress associated with an activity, or maybe not knowing quite what to expect, because we want to make sure that we're supporting the person to be successful in areas that might be new to them. And of course, employment might be, for many people, a very new experience. So we want to plan for that. We want to see what that looks like so that we can ensure we've identified the supports the person needs to be successful in those situations. And then the third area that I think is critical is as you begin to work with the individuals, as you begin to answer the question, who is this person? There's going to be work-related interests that start to emerge. You're going to start seeing areas that the person has interest in. And as you'll see with the gentleman and Alberto in an activity we're going to do at the conclusion of our time together, that resulted in us being able to find a mentor who can help us begin to think about his interest and where that might fit in that vocational theme. So what are we observing? Ideal conditions of employment, the person's strengths, interests, supports, complexities, life experiences, skills, and contributions. And also we want to know what motivates the person. That's critical. Places, people, activities, relationships. And also in those same areas, what's kind of the opposite of that? Places that should be avoided, or people that should be avoided, activities. So in summary now, before we move into really the crux of the webinar, we're exploring a wide variety of places and activities one-on-one. We're listening to and observing the job seeker's verbal and nonverbal behavior. And then we spend time to get to know the person. And by that I mean as we move step by step through the process, starting with their favorite activity, an activity that they've never done before that they would like to do. Each step identifies the gaps in knowing who this person is and the questions we want answered, and that leads to what would be the next activity that would help us answer those questions. I wanted to insert this as we transition from just getting grounded again and in best practices to this pretty powerful quote. Wallace Stevens was a poet. He won the Pulitzer, and this is so relevant to the work we do. Accuracy of observation is the equivalent of accuracy of thinking. So if we don't get it right in what we're observing, everything from that step forward is not going to be valid. There are going to be conclusions made that don't fit that person. So that's why it's so important to make sure we spend enough time observing who the person is and are thoughtful in where that information takes us as we move to the final outcome of employment. So the diagram here is really the first page of a document that is just invaluable. It highlights through the circular form of the format up there, the CE competencies. And the one that we're really going to focus on today has to do with collecting, interpreting, and using information, and also communicating with others. The interesting thing is that the competencies are laid down in this document. I'm going to show you where you can obtain it on the internet. It starts with the competency that is considered the most important. And this is pretty profound. The most important competency is a positive and open approach to life. So that will again tie back to the focus of the webinar today, and you'll see how that links. So we will come back to that to talk about the knowledge, skills, and abilities that tie back to each of those competencies. So, what can Sherlock Holmes and other sleuths teach us about discovery? Well, specifically, if you kind of synthesize the processes utilized, it's to constantly observe, tune into your senses, and practice mindfulness. And through those processes that you go throughout the day, and it helps in your life in general, not just in the work that we do, we become aware. And by becoming aware, or the path by which we develop awareness is using our senses. And when you begin to use your senses, you're now able to observe and not merely see. And in the work A Scandal in Bohemia by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who is the author of Sherlock Holmes, I'm just going to read a little piece here. So it begins with Watson. I could not help laughing at the ease with which Holmes explained his process of deduction. When I hear you give your reasons, I remarked, the thing always appears to me to be so ridiculously simple that I could easily do it myself. Though at each successive instance of your reasoning, I am baffled until you explain your process, and yet I believe that my eyes are as good as yours. Quite so, Sherlock answers, lighting a cigarette and throwing himself down into an armchair. You see, but you do not observe. The distinction is clear. For example, you have frequently seen the steps which lead up from the hall to this room. Watson, frequently. Holmes, how often? Watson, well, some hundreds of times. Holmes, then how many are there? Watson, how many? I don't know. Holmes, quite so. You have not observed, and yet you have seen. That is just my point. Now I know that there are 17 steps because I have both seen and observed. And I thought that was so relevant to the work we're going to be doing. This is a segment from National Geographic Brain Games. It's an older series. It's a science series that explores really cognitive science, focusing on language, communication, perception, memory, attention, and observation, reasoning, and emotion. And as you are hoping, I'm assuming, I can motivate you to believe that you can improve in these areas of observation, that you might want to go to YouTube and pull some of those up. So this segment is David Copperfield, and it's about paying attention, but it's also about observing and having to deal with a lot of stimulation going on, kind of multitasking. So David is going to explain the expectation. It's about a minute long, and if you so choose, please follow the directions and just see how you do.
Let's put your brain to the test. You're going to multitask. Do two things at once. Now, count how many times you see my picture or name on the screen. At the same time, listen to my voice and count how many times you hear the word magic. Pay attention. Here we go. What's magic about magic is that some magic fools your eyes, while other magic fools your brain. The magic of attention is responsible for some of magic's most impressive illusions. A lot of magic is quite easy to perform, while other magic can be quite difficult to pull off. But that's magic. Harder than you thought? How many times did I say magic? How many times did you see my picture or my name?
How'd you do? Are you a good multitasker?
So it can be pretty telling, and it's hard in this day and time to not be distracted by technology and telephones. And the work that we're talking today is really getting those distractions out of your life during the time that you were focusing on getting to know who the job seeker is. So here's another task. Look at this photo and find the man. Observe the picture, look at all the details, and see if you can locate the gentleman that's in the photograph. He's located right here. What do you observe here? Look at the photograph and see what you find. So the nature, the tree branches and the logs form a baby. Hands, cute little foot, little legs. So for those of you who saw that very quickly, you probably have some high skills in what we're going to be focusing on today. And for those of you who didn't, that doesn't mean that you can't improve in these areas. So these are some of the suggestions. These are some of the things you can do to begin to improve your recollection skills. And these are for you to do at your own convenience. So take a pencil and paper. Look at the objects in a room. Try to remember what you can see. Then walk out and make a list of everything that you can remember. You may find, if you're not highly skilled at this, which is okay, many of us aren't, that what you thought you could remember, the number of items you thought you could remember may be lower than expected. So now go back to the room and look at everything that you missed. If you repeat the test you'll probably find that your list is longer the next time. And the more and more you do this, the higher your skill and competency become as you begin to hone in on how to observe. Tied into that is memory recollection, of course. So focusing on both. And you can do this throughout the day. Faces, clothes, objects, animals, trees, flowers, just about anything as you're moving through your day, taking a minute to focus on that. And it actually does improve your ability to observe and remember. Another exercise is watch people in crowds. How are they behaving? How are they interacting with others? What's going on that you're seeing, and what are some of your thoughts about what's happening? Also, choose an item. And throughout the day, look for as many other examples of that item as you can find. Take a walk and focus on just what your senses can pick up. And you can isolate that to just whatever you hear on one walk, whatever you see another time, whatever you smell, whatever you feel. And just focus on that throughout your week. And then also, and we're going to do this a little bit later, observe a photograph and try to list as many details as you can remember as you turn away from the photograph. So observing is critical, as Wallace Stevens says. If you don't get that right, whatever happens after that with the information is flawed. It's not based on reality to the extent that we can know reality, but it's not tied to valid information that you can then move to the next steps to hopefully create the path to high quality outcomes. So to observe is to see, but also to understand, and that requires listening. So through listening, it's a full brain process, as all of these are. It's what's called cognitive science. We have to listen for both the verbal and nonverbal communication. We have to concentrate. We have to understand what's happening in the interactions from the person we're listening to. We respond. We have to remember. And to do this, we have to use all our senses, not only to the words the person's saying, but the emotions, the body language, and the details that the person is expressing. We also need to focus in on the person's appearance. That can be telling. And again, it's sometimes what the person doesn't say that can be more valid information about who the person is than what they do, because we have in many cases rewarded individuals to say what they think we want them to say. Also look at what is not being said. If a situation arises where there's no reaction, that might just be a lack of interest, or it might be something deeper and richer about who the person is. So focus on that as well. Focus on facial expressions, facial changes, body language, voice tone. And also make sure that if you're not clear on what the person's indicating or sharing or talking about, paraphrase to ensure that you have understood them correctly, or ask questions to get additional information, again, to ensure that what the person's sharing is what you're picking up and what you're understanding. So to improve listening skills, you have to be attentive. You have to focus on the person, using eye contact so that they know you're interested. Being aware of your body language so that you don't look closed, but you look open and accepting of the person and what they're sharing. Provide encouragement as they're sharing information. Statements or even not using words, but continuing to show verbally that what they're saying you're hearing and it's important and you're interested in it. Don't interrupt. And again, I stress, ask for additional information to clarify if you feel like you're not understanding what the job seeker is saying or meaning. And use open-ended questions. Those are questions that require more than a yes or no response. How the person answers those can really be critical to understanding what's important to them or what they're concerned about. And then we move to critical thinking. And that's where we analyze and synthesize the information that we've gleaned through those other processes so that we begin to create an understanding of who the person is. Critical thinking involves conceptualizing, analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating information. And we're able to do that because we've gained information from observing, communicating, experiencing time with the person. Then we reflect on our thinking about what we're learning, and we use our reasoning. Again, critical thinking can be improved. And these are the way. Begin to investigate. Explore different points of view. Open your mind to how other people may see things or move through life or what their life experiences have resulted in how their point of view has been formed, how their world view has developed. Question assumptions. Don't just take as fact. Recognize your biases. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Try to understand the job seeker's point of view. And then you can practice this when you're out driving, walking, doing other things. You can add to that, trying to think about a problem, any problem, and determine as many possible solutions to that problem as you can think of. So analyze this photograph. I think we all know it's Lincoln. It's a very, very famous picture. Just take a minute and look at it. Analyze it. Critique it. See what you think's going on in that upside down photograph. This is that same photograph right side up. It's a little bit scary looking. As you looked at the upside down photograph, were you able to conceive of how it might look right side up? Were you able to see some of the aspects of it upside down that you realized by observing and conceiving and analyzing that there might be something amiss, other than the fact that he has unusually dark circles under his eyes in the upside down photograph? Were you able to see some of the other distortions? But even with that, we were able to tell that it's Lincoln. Okay, so moving into creativity. Creativity is the fun part of the work that we do. It's the ability to take the information that we've gleaned to develop ideas, alternatives, to see possibilities, and to develop unique perspectives. So look at here, how many triangles do you see? Think outside the box of how we sometimes blindly go through our day. I should not have said blindly. Please take that out. Think outside of the box of how we may tend to not look very far beyond the superficial view of what we're looking at. There are 15, and I'll show them to you. I think most of us will get these, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's the whole triangle, 10, 11, 12. I'm not manipulating the pointer. 12, 13, and this is kind of, you really had to think way outside of the box. 14, 15. So moving into mindfulness, this has changed my life. I have been one of those folks who tend to spend a lot of time in my head. I've actually walked into walls before in thought. There is also a video you may have seen, and it's not just this one woman. It's many people, but she is so engrossed in looking at her phone that she's walking down the sidewalk in New York City, not looking. One of the sidewalk openings that's a way for businesses to receive orders is open, and she walks right into it and falls into it. She's an older woman, so she actually was injured. So mindfulness is something that we in our culture have a need to redevelop a focus on. And you'll see our lives are much better. We can improve in so many ways. This comes from the Greater Good Science Center at the University of California, Berkeley. It's a research center, and it's developed, and they do disseminate information to the public at large. And it focuses on the scientific understanding of happiness, compassion, social bonding, altruism, and mindfulness. So under the work that they do, they've defined mindfulness as maintaining a moment-by-moment awareness of our thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, and the surrounding environment. We are in the moment. We are taking in information by being present and using all of our senses. Mindfulness involves acceptance so that our thoughts and feelings are not good or bad. They're just our thoughts and feelings and how we are thinking through a given moment. So when we practice mindfulness, we tune into what we're sensing in that present moment. And it's amazing. There's so much interesting, fascinating research around mindfulness and how it's changing lives, utilized in prison systems and in a variety of other ways where people are struggling in life in big ways that have kept them from having quality in how they spend their day. So I would really suggest, if it's not an area you have interest in already, Google it and learn more about it. So I kind of alluded to this. The reason we practice it is that it can have a variety of physical, psychological, and social benefits. It helps us focus, tune out distractions, and improve our memory and attention skills. And that is exactly the state we have to be in to be able to be effective as we're working with job seekers and answering the question, who is this person? The next important area is from all the information that you're gleaning from spending time with this person in all those ways we've already talked about. You have to begin to train your brain, sorry, if we can cut that out. You have to train your brain to focus on what is important in this moment to answering the question, who is this person? And filter out information that's not relevant. So if you stay grounded in the fact that the information that you want to hold on to, that you want to document, that you want to make part of the discovery profile, is tied to answering the question who the person is in all those various ways that the discovery profile document outlines, then you don't become overwhelmed and you don't get caught up in aspects of information that really will just clutter up your brain as you're trying to really stay true to the discovery process. And sometimes we have to, again, train our brains to do that. So, quick cautionary tale. Do not judge. The work that we do is not about judging this person or their family or any aspect of the process of discovery that we are engaging in to get to know the person. I can't stress enough how critical it is to work as a team. It keeps us honest. It ensures that our own life experiences, biases, values, belief systems, our worldviews are not negatively impacting the ability to achieve high quality outcomes. And when we work together, we are able to challenge one another. We're able to see different points of view that can help us be pure to looking at this individual and understanding who they are without creating biases from our own perspectives. And also, we've got to be aware of stereotyping. Go beyond how people are viewed as groups and categories and look at the individual in a person-centered sort of way. So we're going to quickly just move through. I had mentioned earlier the diagram that you saw that really lists all of the competencies tied to best practices. And so through the work of many years of identifying the process and moving the emerging practice of what we were learning about discovery and customized employment to best practices and what we've learned that have created consistent good outcomes. There are the 9 competencies, and that was the diagram we saw earlier. Now I want to go through the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are tied to each of those 9 competencies that relate back to the title and focus of the webinar. And I wanted to include where you can obtain that document. It's excellent. And I think will be very, very helpful in a variety of ways as you are either as an organization shifting to employment best practices or as an individual looking at how this all fits together. We know from adult learning theory, as you are involved in new information, it's important that you can see how that fits into your life or your work. And this document here can bring all that together under a structure that can be utilized to improve folks that you may be working with, staff, managers who can provide the supports needed for staff to succeed through the structure of this document that's based on a lot of information gathering and work early on around employment best practices. So hopefully I've left that on long enough where you can see the website where you can obtain this document. So we're going to go through these pretty quickly. The ranking, as you will see when you get the document, is that the knowledge, skills, and abilities are ranked in order of the most important. And these knowledge, skills, and abilities are what are required for individuals doing this work to achieve high quality outcomes. And it's not each one of them. I've just pulled out a few that tie back to the focus of today. So the most important, which is amazing and very encouraging, the most important competency of individuals who do this work and achieve quality outcomes is positive and an open approach to life. They're enthusiastic, love to learn, and they're open to new ideas. Optimistic, focusing on the positive rather than focusing on the perceived difficulties and why we can't do something. They're flexible. Under the competency of customized job and development is being able to interpret, apply knowledge, and research. Under the competency of respecting and relating to others, those who are successful in this work have skills in interacting and understanding how other people may be reacting to a situation and why they may be reacting that way, that they can put themselves in their shoes, that also ties to empathy. They can work as a part of a team, have the ability to build and maintain relationships, put others at ease, and they value connecting with folks. They're culturally sensitive. They have an understanding of various cultures. They have a worldview that people with disabilities can contribute to the workplace, that they are valuable members of the pool of potential employees or employers if they've been hired. They treat others with respect and dignity, and they're curious and interested in learning about other people. Under the competency of business and employment practices, the person has skills in determining how a system, business, or job should work to identify operational improvements, that they can conceive of that. They're able to monitor or assess performance for improvement or areas where improvement is needed. And they can imagine how a job or business process will look after it's changed. Under business networking, the skill in negotiating a win-win solution, ability to build networks, and we call that social capital, and to coordinate actions in relation to other people's actions. Collecting, interpreting, and using information. They're involved in the ability to systematically inquire, ask questions to get at key issues. They are skilled in updating and integrating new information and knowledge. They have the ability to observe, identify, and interpret relevant information, generate a number of ideas, come up with creative ways to solve problems, and use logic and reasoning. When communicating with others, they have the ability to communicate in a variety of ways, verbal and nonverbal. They listen actively, and by that we mean ensuring that the person has your full attention, ensuring that you are understanding the points being made, asking questions, and not interrupting. They're also skilled in written communication and have the ability to understand written material, and also the ability to present information in a logical manner. Under planning and organizing, the ability to organize information or steps into a logical sequence, and they can see the bigger picture. They can look beyond the immediate steps of obtaining information, pull it together, and see the bigger picture and how all those bits of info link. So now what I want to do is begin to utilize the information we've talked to at this point to show how all of that links back to the functional work we do. I want to introduce Rose just because sometimes we talk about contributions and that can be kind of confusing. Rose is a woman in her 30s who was raised by her grandmother. When I first met her, I had come into town where she lives to work from out of state. I'd had a couple of conference calls and some follow-up work I needed to do before it was time for me to spend time with Rose and her support staff. And as soon as I met Rose, she was able to share the own narrative of her story. She's someone who comes in and takes charge. I'm embarrassed to say that the rental car I had was full of papers that were in disarray based on how I was trying to be prepared and move through the information I was responsible for on the conference calls that I had prior. And I did not take the time to reorganize it because of the timeline. So when I meet Rose, she comes out to get in the front seat with me as we're going to spend some time doing her favorite thing that she likes to do. And as soon as she opened the door, she said, "Now, I know your mother has raised you better than this. Let's get this mess cleaned up." And that was her personality. She has a sense of humor, a lightheartedness, obviously had a great role model with her grandmother, that we keep things organized. And she was able to help me pull all that together. And she had ideas that actually made some of it much better as I'm traveling. So Rose's personality, her caring, her desire to help, her skill sets for organization were also apparent. And because I'd never met her before, and I love that she came right in and was just so comfortable to bring the skill sets of organization to the rental car, I asked the staff about that, and that is a typical interest of Rose. She loves organization. She does not like chaos. That's one of her skill sets. And we know that that's important to her because she does it without being asked. She comes in, assesses a situation. If it needs her skill set, she moves right in to make that a better environment than it was prior. And what business does not need those skill sets? I can't think of one. And the added contribution is this wonderful, caring, wanting to help, but self-initiating personality that she has. So that's Rose. As we're moving through the next story, it's Michael. And I just want you to make some observations as I give you time to look at each picture. So just to give you a little bit of the background, as I spent time with Michael at his home and some other situations that he wanted to spend time in, things he loves to do, things that we think would fit with his interest, what I learned pretty quickly, he loves cause and effect. He loves to take some action and see the counter reaction. He is very curious, and he loves to assemble things. He loves to put things in order because that's tied to cause and effect. Putting together this computer resulted in him then, and I don't believe I included this photograph, pulling up a chair in front of the computer to begin to see if he had put it together correctly so that he can make things happen on the computer. So in this photograph, we aren't using language at all. The IT specialist that we met with to see if she would help us assess Michael's skill sets, just used gestures. And she initially took it apart, put it back together, and here's Michael beginning to put it back together after it was indicated it was his turn to attach the wiring. So that's one area of possible cause and effect related jobs where you assemble things and make the thing work, or something happens in reaction. But there are other environments that have some cause and effect aspects to them that we wanted to check out. And this is actually, we met with the head of a labor union who trains folks in plumbing and electrical aspects of whatever their job focus is. And so we just wanted to see in that environment, because that's so different than an office setting, what did that look like? So, so what do you see here? Curiosity. Michael had not seen this tool before. The other thing that was astounding when we get out and begin to do real life assessments in the community, we're able to learn so much more because the community is wide open to opportunities and experiences. The great thing is that the head of this organization was able to take over regarding safety. The person there is a support staff for Michael, and she cares very much about him. There was a general view that Michael might not understand safety. This is a grinder of some sort. It had very sharp points on it, and the gentleman made us get out of the way and felt we were babying him and to let him explore. And we found out that Michael has a very strong understanding of safety. He was very, very cautious because he recognized pieces on this equipment were sharp. This is pretty obvious. Sometimes as we are observing, um, it, it's a very, very clear nonverbal communication. What we learned here is that Michael does not like the noise that often goes into those more um, jobs that are around plumbing and electricity and that sort of thing. So right now, we know that an environment that is full of noise is not one that he wants to work in. And that was critical to narrowing down as we moved through the process and tested further um, what kind of work environment suited Michael. And again, he loves the assembling and the cause and effect and how that ties into a whole. So that was still apparent there. So again, sometimes the information is real obvious. And we know that for Michael, the industrial world is not where he's going to be happy working. Sometimes, as we said earlier, it's not what the person says, it's what they're not saying. Beth had shared that she really wanted to work with animals. And there was a particular pet store that she wanted to work in this small town in Florida. Michael's from New Mexico. So Beth here, what I hope you can see is that there's a 400-pound python in that case. So take a moment and observe Beth in that photograph and see what your observations, what your questions. Well, when we think about critical thinking, we remembered, hopefully you remember that we look at experiences and reasoning. We know that in life, some people are afraid of snakes, and that fear might be compounded by the fact that this particular one weighs 400 pounds. And as I'm observing her, I'm not quite sure what's going on. So when we had the conversation, she was totally freaked out by that snake, and such that she didn't want to talk about it. So one observation might be, oh, she's not bothered by it, she's looking at it, she's quiet, no big deal. In my life experience, I'd be running away from it. So I'm assuming, based on my perspective, that Beth doesn't have a fear of snakes, when in reality she does. Her own way of dealing with that was very, very different. And the only way to know that is to check in. Again, sometimes it's based on just the knowledge we have that fears of snakes are common in our culture, or actually many cultures. That one's extra big, so I'm not knowing what's going on, so I'm going to have a conversation about it. So that's why it's important to tune in what the person's not saying as well. So what I want us to do now is I'm going to move through the photographs. Hopefully you can work as a team, but if you're participating in the webinar alone, that's fine too. But Alberto, a couple of weeks ago, his support staff, Amy, and I spent time in a discovery activity, the first discovery activity, at a music store, because we knew from observing and also from folks who are champions for him that he loves music. So we wanted to dig in to see what that was like. And A music store is where you can experiment with a variety of instruments. The what I want you to do, the next slides are photographs. They're taken in order as we move through this music store. I want you to observe each picture, take notes of what you're seeing, uh, reflect with your team members or by yourself, analyze what you think's happening, synthesize the information at the end, and come up with what you feel you've learned that may be grounded in valid information about Alberto, or it may be grounded in the fact that you think this is what's happening, but you want to test it further. And that leads to the next steps regarding how you want to spend time with Albert in his community, doing particular activities that will help answer some of the questions that come up each time we spend with the individual and begin to look at the information. So I'm going to just move through the pictures, and then at the end I'll share with you kind of how we pulled that information together. So I have met Amy, and there's Albert arriving at the music shop. And this is the first stop. We don't know what instruments that he has had the opportunity to experiment with. He has a lot of instruments that are geared more toward kids, younger kids. So we really wanted to experiment with instruments that are not so tied to maybe stigma around the fact that Albert's an adult, but the music that he loves is in the form of toys. The next picture, Amy is pulling down a ukulele. So observe Albert, his reaction, what you're seeing. Jot down notes. And I'll fill in information that you would not be able to have. Amy did try to take his hand to strum the instruments, and he pulled his hand away. So I'm just going to objectively describe what's happening in the photograph that you would not be able to pick up just based on looking at a still photo. This is a drum we're experimenting with. Albert needs a built-up, whatever he's holding, it needs to be built up, and the particular drumstick was too thin for him to hold. So you'll see later we actually reverse it so that he's holding more of the built-up side, that's the side that's supposed to hit the drum top. But we just wanted to try that to see if that made any difference. So again, observe what you're seeing. Take notes. And in that, you'll see a paper, New Mexico Kids. And I don't want you to think that that was chosen for Albert again, based on the notion that sometimes we choose age inappropriate materials. Albert's an adult. And the purpose of that, and I'll just go ahead and fill this in, we had met with a musician in Albuquerque, where Albert lives. As a mentor, we felt we don't all have expertise in the world of music and how all that might come out as possibilities for Albert. And so we went to where the expertise was. We used someone's social capital, met with a musician who's very involved in the music community in Albuquerque. One of the areas is working with kids around the importance of music in our life. And so one brainstorming session that we had very way ahead, we needed to stifle ourselves, but we didn't. So that's something we constantly work on. You shouldn't be jumping to a place before you get to know who the person is. And the only reason we did is we had a strong idea from all the folks who've known Albert that this is very much a consistent part of his life. So we met with this mentor, and he does do some work around kids and music. And Albert loves kids. He's thought of as kind of a part of the family in the home where he lives. It's a community residential home run by another provider organization. And he just absolutely adores kids. He's so good with them. Albert doesn't use language the way I'm using language now, but it's very obvious. His smiles are just gorgeous. If he doesn't like something, he also makes a sound where you know that's not a sound of pleasure, but a sound of frustration or displeasure. And so we knew that already, based on having just an informational interview with an expert in the area of music, that was something we wanted to keep in the back of our mind. But we really jumped the gun there, so I want to share that with you too. But also want to clarify, because that would be very stereotyping if we chose New Mexico Kids, this periodical, for Albert. That's not what that's about. We wanted to get more information regarding some of the ideas that the mentor, the musician, had. Okay, what do you see there? And again, these pictures are in order, one after the other. Next picture, a tambourine. What do you think's happening there? Another photograph. Why is that one significant? And I'll just kind of back up a little bit. Oh, wrong way. There's something significant about the tambourine that you don't see in the pictures with the drum or the ukulele. And so one of the instruments there, and we bought that for Albert, it's an instrument that shakes and makes a soft sound, almost like sand in a container. So we picked that up, and in that picture we brought it to him. So what do you see there? And there. What's important about that in terms of who Alberto is. Here's the drum area of the music department in this store. Again, something significant there. And here's where we've turned the piece that goes with the drum set earlier, just to see what that would be like. If he could hold that, if he might use that to hit on the cymbal, which he did not. He just held it in his hand. Exploring the organ and pianos. What do you see there? And this is where we are ending our activity with him. About to head out the door after purchasing this musical piece. So take a moment, and as I showed you in the earlier directive about what we're going to do looking at Alberto's pictures. Again, if you're in a group, talk about the observations, reflect on them, and then analyze and synthesize what you think was going on. And I'm going to give you about 30 seconds, and I'm going to go through and share with you what we learned. Some of the information we did not even notice until we went back and looked at the photographs. So it's so critical to take photographs as if the individual's okay with it, you have the correct permissions and signed documents, because that can be so telling as you are in the moment of trying to create opportunities for the person to have experiences through the particular activity. Sometimes it's hard to focus on all of that, even if it's two folks going out together or one's observing and the other's maybe engaged with the job seeker. You still lose so much that photographs can point out. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to pull that together before I go through the photographs and share what our synthesis of the information is. Okay, so we'll quickly wrap this up and share what we came up with. And again, this is the first activity, so some of this stuff we've got to test. We know that Albert was in a good mood. He wanted to be there, so we feel the information's valid. If you're with someone and they're not having a good day, and maybe they don't want to be involved in the discovery activity at that point in time, it's a good thing to just choose another time to go out, because it's important that you get information about the individual that is not distorted by the fact that maybe they've had a bad day, maybe their medication has impacted them, or all the many reasons that any of us could not be in the best shape to work with someone around our interest or finding out who we are. So tune into that and be present where the person is to determine if it's a good day to really get good valid information. So we knew with Albert, or Alberto, we call him both, that this was a good day. He wanted to be there and was enjoying it. Alberto, our thinking here as we moved through the process and got more and more information and looked at the photographs, we think what was going on is that Alberto liked the colors. There were a lot of just beautiful colors, and he seemed to tune into the instruments that were very colorful. He adores Amy, so he was watching her. Our hope was that that might be an interest too, and we wanted to see what would happen, but it was just he was watching Amy. He was not interested in these stringed instruments. She's showing him how to utilize it and hoping that he might want to stroke it. She did use hand over hand to help him so we could further see if that would motivate him to want to hear the sounds, but he didn't. He just brought his hand back down. So we're pretty sure that stringed instruments are not his interest. We thought he might enjoy the drum because, again, it's a smaller instrument with a thickened drum stick. We thought maybe he could have control of that, and that might be important. We also demonstrated how just to hit it with your hand. Again, just very minimal interest, as you can see right there. No interest at all. But then he begins to look at her and kind of tune into what she's trying to get him to do. But really, no enthusiasm at all. His nonverbal behavior is so clear. So we knew that was not something that Alberto was interested in. The tambourine, we see a little bit more interest here. If you look at this, he's holding it in his hand. Amy is showing him how. And now he's holding it by himself. This is really the first instrument that he held independently. So we at that point in time, we didn't know what it meant other than he does have some weakness. Maybe it's important that he be independent in manipulating the instrument, not have to have the help of someone to hold it or put his hands on the strings. So that was kind of one thing we were wondering about. Look at that smile and that curiosity where he's really even lifting his body up more toward it. Very interested in this instrument. He seemed to like the soft sound it made. He seemed to like the fact that he could hold it independently. And wanted to keep it. He did not let it go. The other instruments, he just dropped his hand when our support, as we were exploring it with him, ended. This one, he did not. He's tuning into the cymbals We're not sure what about that. There were some special lights there. So there's some color on there. So there we don't know. Is it the color that's interesting? As we think about the stringed instruments, he seemed to be tuning into the bright colors as opposed to the wooden or instruments. It didn't really have the coloring as part of the creation of that particular instrument. Seems to have had enough of looking at the symbol at that point. Again, try to see if we could get him to hit the instrument with the stick so that he could experience the sound himself. We showed him how hitting the cymbal creates this reverberation, but had no interest. Here we're testing out an organ. He's looking, tuning in. We don't know if he's seen that instrument before. Very quickly looked away. So our hypothesis is, since Alberto has a beautifully unique way of communicating, not using language, it appears that when he's not interested, he looks away. And so we're going to test that out further, because that would be such an efficient way to respect the fact that Alberto's communicating with us, what he likes and what he doesn't like. Here we're leaving, and we checked in with Alberto to see if he wanted that instrument. And again, you can see this picture and the other picture, there is a facial expression that's very different and that's consistent, that seems to imply that that's the instrument he likes, that's the instrument that he wanted to hold on to and was very independent in utilizing it. So our next step is to meet with the mentor and talk about what are the instruments that have those qualities, that have this softer sound, that Alberto could manipulate based on his strength and movement. And so we just want to learn more about that, so we can, now that we've narrowed down the musical instruments that appeal to him, to what does that variety look like that fits in with the traits of that particular instrument, musical instrument, as well as who Alberto is. So at this point, I think our time has run out. I hope that some of the information resonated with you and gives you some ideas. There's much you can follow up on about mindfulness and the competencies and the knowledge, skills, and abilities required, and how that fits into, as we began, the model of Sherlock Holmes, and really observing, being able to determine if the information is valid, and then begin to analyze, reflect on it, and synthesize so that we come up with valid outcomes for the individuals with whom we work around employment. I appreciate you participating in this time together with me. And if there's any questions that you might have, please type those in and I will answer them. And I'm sure together we'll learn even more. So thank you.